Something nobody talks about when it comes to US debt is who we actually owe the money to. The most recent chart with all the breakdowns I have is up to September 2024. It'll serve its purpose, even though now the debt is about 36.3 trillion. Now, most of you won't believe this, but it's not a country that America owes all of this money to. It's not even all of the countries that we owe all of the money to that is the largest holder of US debt. Because the largest holder of US debt is actually us. It's mostly in the United States. 49% of all US debt is actually held by US individuals and institutions. In fact, out of the $36 trillion that we owe, only 25%, or about $9 trillion, a little bit less, is held by foreign entities. Japan is the largest country that holds US debt. It is about 3.2% of that 35 trillion. So Japan has about 1.1 trillion in US treasuries. That is nothing compared to how much debt the US Federal Reserve holds by itself. The Fed holds about 12.4%, so that's almost $4 trillion in treasuries. And another 15% of US debt, a little over $5 trillion, is intragovernmental, meaning held by the government. The US Social Security Trust Fund, the US Military Retirement Fund, and the US Civil Service Retirement Fund. So yeah, the vast bulk of the entirety of US debt, $36 trillion, about 74% of it, in fact, is held within the purview of the United States. So this is like a large extended family that just owes each other money. And you can consider the Federal Reserve and other intergovernmental agencies as just a husband or a wife borrowing money from their spouse. But that doesn't mean we're invulnerable. I mean, look at the leverage that China and Japan are holding over us now for the sheer fact that China is not repurchasing debt in US treasuries that comes to maturity, and Japan is dumping billions of dollars of US bonds, and they are harming demand for our treasury bonds in the market. And because our debt is so cheap, we have to pay a much higher interest just to service that debt. In fact, it's costing you, the American taxpayer, a total of $952 billion a year just to pay interest on how much we've borrowed. That's a little over 3% of our GDP. And the only reason why this debt has gone so high is because of the massive tax cuts that were given to the uber rich and corporations in 2018. I used a chart that shows the US annual deficit since 1985, and you see how it is up to today. This year is 2017, and when the tax cuts hit, you see the slope of our deficit skyrocket, and then of course COVID hits and we go into a deficit of $3.2 trillion in 2020. It was $2.8 trillion in 2021. By 2022, it dropped to $1.4 trillion. We have not had a skyrocketing of our deficit at this level since we were in World War II. So even the oil crisis in 1973, which shook the whole world economy, nor the Great Recession in 2008, did we see a deficit like this. And the reason why we incurred such a massive deficit of 3.2 trillion and then 2.8 trillion is that we were facing an epidemic at the same time that we gave one of the largest tax cuts to the wealthy in US history. I've even made a chart with the national deficit in blue and our overall federal debt in this reddish color from the year 1992 to today. And believe it or not, during the Clinton administration in the 90s, we didn't have a deficit. We actually had a surplus. Now notice when there is a spike in the deficit at this level, you see right here, you'll see the trajectory of our overall debt start to get much more steep. When the deficit drops, you will see the steepness of our debt flatten out just a bit. Funny thing, when Republicans say that Democrats are the ones who crashed the economy, here's a chart that disproves the nonsense. Each massive drop in our deficits, boom, have all happened under a Democratic president. And whenever a deficit seems to skyrocket under a Democratic president, it also falls under the same presidency. This isn't a belief. I'm showing you the data right here. Please pause to read it, replicate the chart for yourself. Now let me just drive this point home. The less that this country taxes the people who can pay the taxes, the more of a deficit we incur. The more of a deficit that we get, the more that this country will borrow from the world and from their own people. And the more we borrow, the more debt we have, that's more of an interest payment that you, the taxpayer, have to pay just so the wealthy don't pay their taxes. So the regular guy is paying taxes so that the wealthy don't have to pay taxes. If that doesn't make you angry, as an American, not about Democrat, not about Republican, but just as an American who pays taxes and sees his tax dollars wasted for the uber rich and probably a lot of people who you may think don't deserve the social safety nets that you're providing. But of the people who can actually afford to pay the taxes, who make the most profit off of the infrastructure that this country provides, if they actually paid what they're supposed to pay, then you would not be footing the bill for the people that you're loathing to cover. Food for thought. I hope you appreciate the breakdown. I am the Geo Hussar. This is my alt account, the Alt Hussar. Like, share, follow, save, and thanks for watching.